It was supposed to be the happiest day of my sister's life. White roses, golden lights, soft music floating through the air. It all looked like something out of a dream. But behind the smiles and champagne glasses, something darker was brewing. I never thought my own family would turn on me, but they did, publicly and cruelly. And it all started with a simple refusal. My name's Riley, and I'm the successful one in the family, or at least that's what they call me. A few years back, I took a leap of faith, built a startup from scratch, and after years of sleepless nights and sacrifices, I finally bought a penthouse in the city. It wasn't just a home. It was a symbol of every battle I'd fought on my own. And I was proud of it. That day at the wedding, everyone was dressed to impress. My sister, Claire, looked radiant in her gown, and I was genuinely happy for her. But I could feel it. My parents' eyes watching me from across the room. That familiar tight-lipped smile that always meant they were about to ask for something big. Or rather, demand it. During the reception, they pulled me aside. At first, it was subtle. My dad talking about how the city was getting too expensive, and how the penthouse I had wasn't being used properly by just one person. Then came the real punch. My mom told me they wanted to move in, permanently. They expected me to hand over the keys to the penthouse like there was some spare room I didn't care about. I was stunned. I tried to stay calm, tried to explain that it wasn't just a place, it was my safe space, my reward for years of hard work. But they didn't want to hear it. When I refused, my mother's face twisted in a way I hadn't seen before. And right there, in front of the waitstaff, a few distant cousins and a shocked guest or two, she slapped me. Hard. Everything stopped for a second. The music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, it all faded. I could feel eyes on me, whispers starting, my cheek burning. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, frozen, humiliated at my own sister's wedding. And that was the moment I knew I couldn't let it go. I couldn't pretend it didn't happen. The betrayal, the entitlement, the way they turned on me like I owed them my success. No. That slap didn't just sting my skin. It woke something up inside me. Something sharp. Something determined. I didn't react that night. I let them smile through photos and pretend everything was perfect. But behind my calm face, I was already planning. If they thought they could humiliate me, manipulate me, and walk away without consequences, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Because I wasn't just their child anymore. I was the one they underestimated. And I was ready to show them what real revenge looked like. After that slap, I quietly left the wedding hall. No dramatic scene, no shouting match. Just me, walking out with my pride shattered, but my mind spinning with thoughts. I took a cab back to my penthouse, the very place they thought they could take from me. I stared out the window the entire ride, watching the lights of the city blur past, thinking about every moment that had led up to this. You see, it wasn't just about the penthouse. It was never just about the space. It was about how they always saw me, not as a person with dreams and boundaries, but as their backup plan. Growing up, I was the invisible one. Claire was always the favorite, the golden girl. She got the attention, the love, the gentle words. And me, I got the pressure. I was the one expected to fix things, to be strong, to never complain. When Dad lost his job, it was me who picked up side gigs at 15. When Mom got sick briefly in college, I left my internship early to come home. And still, it was never enough. Even when I made it, when I built my business and started living the life I once only dreamed of, they didn't see it as mine. They saw it as theirs, as if my success was a family achievement they were entitled to share in without ever having walked a single step of the journey with me. I paid for Claire's grad school without a second thought. I helped my parents pay off their mortgage. I never asked for recognition, just a little respect. But now they wanted the last thing that was just mine. And when I said no, they slapped me, like I was still the teenager they could guilt or silence. I didn't sleep that night. I walked from room to room, staring at the art I'd chosen, the furniture I saved up for, the skyline view that had kept me going through the hardest nights. This place was my story, my survival, and they tried to take it from me like it was a toy. The next morning, I got a text from my cousin Jenna. "Are you okay?" she wrote. I saw what happened. That was so messed up. I didn't answer, but it told me everything. I wasn't imagining it. People saw. People knew. But I also knew how my family would spin it. That I was selfish, ungrateful, cold. They probably already stared calling relatives, telling them I'd refuse to help my aging parents, that I'd embarrass them in public. And just like clockwork, I got a call from my Aunt Linda. I let it go to voicemail. Her message? "Sweetie, I heard what happened. Your mom's heartbroken. Maybe you could just talk to them and try to work things out. Family is everything, you know. Family is everything." That line stuck in my head like a splinter. I kept playing the scene over and over. The cold look in my mother's eyes. The way my dad didn't even step in. Claire didn't either. She just stood there, frozen in her white dress, watching like it wasn't even real. And that's when it hit me. I'd always been alone in that family. I was just waking up to the truth. But this time, I wasn't going to let them walk over me. Not again. I wasn't going to be the good child anymore. I started digging, looking back through old bank statements, messages, emails. I wanted to remember every time they'd crossed a line, taken from me, manipulated me into saying yes. And wow, there were more than I thought. I found emails where my dad had used my company's name to try and get favors from people I'd never even met. I found messages from my mom to relatives saying I owed them everything because they raised me. I even found one from Claire a few years back where she joked to her friend that Riley's practically our family agent. That night, I opened a private document on my laptop and started writing everything down. Not just the facts, but the feelings. The resentment I'd buried. The guilt they used like a weapon. It wasn't just a journal, it was my proof. My preparation. I started making quiet changes too. I contacted my lawyer. I moved some funds. I tightened security on all my accounts. And then I hired a property consultant to evaluate the penthouse. Not to sell it, but to protect it. My family didn't know it yet, but the game had changed. But still, part of me hurt. I didn't want revenge just to get back at them. I wanted justice. I wanted them to see what they'd done, to finally understand that I wasn't a possession. I was their daughter, their sister, a human being with limits. I didn't reach out to them. I waited, because I knew they would. People like them always do when they want something more. And right on cue, 2 weeks later, Claire showed up, unannounced, at my building's lobby. Security called me. She was crying. She said it was urgent. I almost told them to send her away, but curiosity won. I agreed to meet her downstairs in the cafe. She looked different. No wedding glow. No smile. Just tired, puffy eyes and trembling hands. She reached across the table and with a shaky voice said something that sent a chill down my spine. "Riley, they're planning something, and you need to be careful." That's when I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. Claire looked around nervously, like someone might be listening. Her hands were shaking slightly as she stirred her untouched coffee. I stayed quiet, just watching her. I wanted to see if this was another performance, or if something real had finally cracked through her polished surface. "I didn't know they were planning this," she said, her voice low. "I swear, Riley. I thought it ended after the wedding, but Mom and Dad, especially Mom, she's not letting it go. She thinks you humiliated her. She's talking about legal action, about how you owe the family." I felt something tighten in my chest. Legal action? For what? Owning my own home? Refusing to hand it over? It sounded insane, but with my family, logic never had much weight. It was always about control, and right now, they were losing theirs. Claire looked down at her hands. I know I've been distant. I didn't say anything that night. I should have, but everything happened so fast. And now I'm in the middle of this, and it's getting worse. I didn't say anything for a while. I just kept thinking back to all the times Claire stood by and said nothing, when I was blamed for things I didn't do, when I was guilt-tripped into giving money or time, when I was told to keep the peace while everyone else did what they wanted. Her silence was part of the problem. But now she looked scared. And if she was scared, then maybe things were even messier than I thought. "They want to find a way to force your hand," she said. Mom said if she can prove you're mentally unstable or disrespectful toward the family, maybe she could get power of attorney or something. I don't know. It sounded ridiculous, but she's serious. She's been talking to people. It felt surreal. My own mother, trying to paint me as unstable, just to get her hands on a property she didn't build, didn't earn, and had no right to. And now Claire was tangled up in it. Maybe realizing too late that our family didn't really care who they hurt, as long as they got what they wanted. I leaned back in my chair, trying to keep my voice calm. Why are you telling me this now? Claire looked like she'd been holding that question inside herself too, because I can't keep pretending. They've dragged me into their mess, and I can't unsee what I saw at the wedding. I thought I was protecting myself by staying quiet, but all I did was let them hurt you. I wanted to believe her. I really did, but trust wasn't something I could hand out anymore, not without thinking twice. I thanked her for telling me. Then I asked her one question. Did you know Mom was going to do that? Slap me. Claire hesitated. That pause said more than any answer. She mentioned you needed a wake-up call, but I didn't think she meant that. I thought it was just Mom being dramatic again. That was enough. I didn't need to hear more. After Claire left, I sat in a cafe for a long time. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about real estate or revenge. This was deeper. A toxic cycle I'd been part of my whole life. And now I was trying to break free. But like any escape, it wasn't going to come without a fight. I started documenting everything. Not just what had happened recently, but the years of patterns, manipulation, emotional pressure. I wasn't planning to go public, but I wanted it all organized. Just in case. In my gut, I knew I was heading into a storm, and I needed to be ready. Meanwhile, the calls didn't stop. A couple of relatives reached out, some pretending to be concerned, others trying to guilt me. She's your mother, they'd say. Or, don't break the family over something material. But none of them were there when I cried through nights building my company from nothing. None of them were slapped in front of wedding guests for saying no. One day, I got a formal-looking envelope in the mail. My stomach sank. I opened it slowly, half expecting it to be a lawsuit. But it wasn't. It was a letter from my parents' lawyer. A formal request asking me to transfer ownership of the penthouse into their name in exchange for ongoing family peace and preservation of reputation. I almost laughed. It was so polished, so fake, like they were trying to mask their threat in elegant language. I didn't respond. Not yet. I needed to stay calm, strategic. Letting them see me rattled was exactly what they wanted. But the worst part? My assistant forwarded me an email from one of our business contacts, a supplier I'd worked with for years. Apparently, someone claiming to be my father had contacted them, asking for favors and saying we were expanding into new investments together. My personal life was bleeding into my professional one, and that crossed a whole new line. That night, I sat on my balcony, watching the lights flicker across the city skyline. Everything I had built was at risk, not because of my enemies, but because of my own family. The same people who once cheered when I bought this place now wanted to strip it from me. And I couldn't help but wonder, what would they destroy next to get what they wanted? I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. They thought I'd break, that I'd bend just to keep the peace. But they were wrong. And they were about to find out just how strong I could be when I had nothing left to lose. A few days after that letter from their lawyer, the air around me shifted. It was like I could feel something closing in. People around me, colleagues, old acquaintances, even a couple of mutual friends, started acting strange. Short messages, weird glances. A few of them stopped replying altogether. I didn't understand why until I got an anonymous message one morning on Instagram. It was a screenshot. Someone had posted on a local forum under a fake name, claiming that I was mentally unstable, that I'd been aggressive toward my own family, and that I was in some kind of downward spiral. The post had vague details, but just enough truth twisted into the lies to make it believable. That's when it hit me. They weren't just trying to take my penthouse anymore. They were trying to ruin me, slowly, quietly. So if I ever pushed back publicly, no one would believe me. I felt sick reading it. I knew who it had to be. My parents had found a way to turn the narrative. They weren't just being entitled anymore. They were being dangerous. And what scared me more was that it was working. My reputation, the thing I'd spent years building, was being chipped away by whispers and doubts planted by the very people who were supposed to love me. But I stayed quiet. I didn't respond online. I didn't call anyone to defend myself. I just kept watching, listening, gathering everything. Claire kept texting, asking to meet again, but I was cautious. I wasn't sure whose side she was on anymore. She said she wanted to help, but every time I asked for specifics, she hesitated. Said things like, "I'm trying not to get caught in the middle," or "They're still my parents." That told me everything. I couldn't rely on her. Then one night, my building's concierge called me upstairs in a panic. Someone had tried to get into my unit while I was gone. A man claiming to be authorized by family showed up with a locksmith. Said the penthouse was being handed over to the rightful owners. Thank God the staff didn't buy it. They called security and had him removed. I couldn't breathe for a moment. I sat on my kitchen floor, phone in my hand, heart pounding. That was the closest they'd come. And it meant only one thing. They were escalating, getting desperate. That kind of bold move wasn't random. It was part of something bigger. Something I hadn't seen yet. The next day, I met with my lawyer again. She was calm, firm, and more worried than usual. She looked me in the eye and said, "Riley, I think they're preparing to challenge your ownership. Fabricate claims about your mental state. Maybe even forge documents. You need to be ahead of this." I nodded, but inside, I was boiling. All my life, I'd been their silent support, their fixer. And now they were trying to make me look like the unstable one. I wasn't just fighting for home anymore. I was fighting for my name, my truth, my freedom from a family that didn't know how to love without controlling. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark, scrolling through old photos, family vacations, birthdays, even Claire's graduation. I kept trying to spot when it changed, when love turned into leverage. But maybe it was always there. Maybe I just didn't want to see it. The next morning, I finally texted Claire, told her if she had anything she wanted to say, she should say it now, face to face. She responded quickly. She sounded shaken. "There's something you need to know," she wrote. "They're going to try to take legal action this week. Mom hired a private investigator. They've been digging through your past, looking for anything they can twist." I didn't ask how she knew. I just agreed to meet her again. This time, I chose the location, my office downtown, a secure place. No surprises. When she arrived, she looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were red, and she kept fidgeting with the hem of her jacket. I asked her point blank, "Are you part of this, Claire? Are you helping them?" She looked at me, stunned, like the question had hurt her. "No, I'm not. I've been trying to warn you, but they've got me trapped too. Mom threatened to cut me off completely if I helped you. Said she'd make sure I paid for my betrayal." I wanted to believe her, but trust was hard now. Still, I let her speak, and what she told me changed everything. Apparently, this wasn't just about the penthouse. My parents had been in serious financial trouble for months. Silent debt, maxed out cards, loans in my father's name tied to failed investments. The penthouse wasn't just a luxury to them. It was their escape plan. If they could force me to hand it over, they could sell it fast and cover up the mess they were drowning in. And the most chilling part? They'd already started spreading rumors to paint me as mentally unstable so that if I refused to cooperate, they could argue I wasn't in a position to manage my own assets. Claire showed me texts, voice messages, even a recorded call between my mom and a family friend where she said, "Riley's not well. We're just trying to help her see reason." I stared at the phone screen, barely hearing the rest of what Claire was saying. I couldn't believe it. My own mother was building a false case against me. Slowly, carefully, like she'd planned it all along. And in that moment, I knew the next move had to be mine. Because if I waited any longer, they wouldn't just take my home. They'd take everything I'd ever fought for. Claire's voice trembled as she handed me her phone. There's something else, something I wasn't supposed to know. I took the phone, not sure what I was about to see. It was a screenshot of an email forwarded from my father to someone named Marcus Hadley. The subject line read, pending transfer agreement, Riley's property. The body of the email discussed preliminary paperwork being drafted, referencing false documentation of emotional instability and long-term estrangement from family, suggesting that I had signed over power of attorney months ago while under duress. My hands clenched as I scrolled. The signature block even had my name on it, but it wasn't my handwriting. It was a poor attempt at forgery. They were really going that far. I looked up at Claire, stunned. How did you get this? She hesitated, then sighed. I borrowed Dad's laptop last week while I was helping him with something. He left it open. I emailed it to myself. I wasn't going to say anything. I was scared. But when you called me today, I couldn't ignore it anymore. It wasn't just manipulation now. It was criminal. They were planning identity fraud, maybe even property theft. And if they had any kind of connections to make it look legitimate, it could get ugly fast. My chest tightened with the realization that this was much deeper than family greed. It was calculated, coordinated. I need to go to the police, I said quietly. Claire nodded, but her face showed hesitation. You can't do it alone. They'll spin it. They'll say you're just overreacting or lying. You need to be smart about this. I hated that she was right. They'd already planted seeds with neighbors, friends, and even business contacts. I'd be seen as the bitter daughter, making things up. I needed more than just emotion. I needed evidence, people, and timing on my side. But just as I started planning the next step, my assistant, Mara, messaged me. Check your inbox. I opened my email and felt the floor shift beneath me. Someone had submitted a formal complaint against me to the state licensing board that handled business certifications. The complaint accused me of fraudulent activity, abusive position, and emotional instability affecting business judgment. The email said my license, and with it, my company was now under review. I stared at the screen in disbelief. They weren't just coming for my home or my reputation. They were trying to destroy everything I had built. My entire career, wiped out by a campaign of lies. Claire watched my face fall. What happened? They filed a complaint against me. I said, my voice hoarse. With the board, if it goes through, I could lose my company. She covered her mouth, horrified. No, Riley, that's not just revenge anymore. That's war. I could barely think. Everything was happening too fast. But deep down, I knew this wasn't a rush job. They'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. My mother, always composed and strategic, probably began sowing doubts the moment I bought the penthouse. They never celebrated my success because it reminded them they didn't own me anymore. I reached out to Mara and told her to start pulling anything related to my credentials, company dealings, employee statements, anything that proved my mental fitness and professional record. I contacted my attorney again and sent her the forged email. She responded immediately. Do not respond directly. We need to prepare. This could turn criminal. Let's play it right. Then came the twist I never saw coming. The next morning, while scanning my building's security logs, I noticed a strange entry. A familiar name. Marcus Hadley, the same man from the email, had signed in as a maintenance contractor 2 weeks ago. No one had questioned it at the time. He wore a fake badge, but I knew that name. He wasn't just someone working with my parents. Marcus Hadley used to be my father's business partner. And years ago, I overheard them fighting during a family gathering. Something about a failed investment, a loan that vanished, and trust that was broken. I didn't know the details back then, but I remembered the tension. And now he was back, sneaking into my building. Claire, I said, showing her the log. This guy. Do you remember Marcus Hadley? Her eyes widened. Yes. Dad used to hate him. They stopped talking years ago. Well, they're talking now. And he's helping them fake documents to take my property. That's who's helping with all this. Claire sat back, speechless. I could see the realization settling in. This wasn't just a greedy family issue. It was a messy web of old grudges, shady business ties, and personal betrayal. Now I wasn't just dealing with emotional manipulation. I was up against people who knew how to play dirty, had legal connections, and clearly no boundaries. And the closer I got to exposing the truth, the more dangerous it felt. As I looked out my office window, the city didn't feel safe anymore. It felt like a battlefield, and I was running out of time. 2 days later, I sat in the hearing room, calm on the outside, but every part of me buzzing with anticipation. My parents were there, dressed in muted grays, their lawyer seated beside them. Marcus Hadley stood nearby, arms crossed, avoiding my gaze. Claire was behind me, silent but steady. She had made her choice. The hearing was to review the complaint filed against me, but what no one in that room knew yet, except my attorney and I, was that we had something bigger. Something that would flip the story upside down. Over the past week, my legal team had worked overtime. They uncovered the fake documents, proved the email trail originated from my parents' IP address, and even had security footage of Marcus entering my building with a stolen contractor badge. Everything was carefully packed and labeled. My attorney began calmly, handing out folders. She walked the board through every accusation, and then, one by one, dismantled each claim. When she played the recorded voice memo, my mother said, "Riley's not well. We're just trying to make sure she doesn't embarrass the family." And chill swept through the room. You could see the shift happen. Their expressions changed. The lies started to crumble. Then came the email, the forged agreement supposedly signed by me. We had a handwriting expert submit a statement confirming the signature was fake. Then the final blow, surveillance footage of Marcus inside the penthouse hallway, along with a sworn statement from the building's head of security. By the time my attorney finished, my parents looked pale. Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear. And me, I just sat there breathing. The board cleared me of all accusations. My professional standing was untouched. And in the closing minutes, my attorney announced that we were pressing charges: fraud, identity theft, attempted property seizure. Marcus was arrested on the spot. My mother stood quickly, as if trying to regain some kind of control. "You're really going to do this to your own family?" she said. I looked her straight in the eyes. "You stopped being my family the moment you tried to destroy my life." Claire broke down behind me. She whispered, "I'm sorry," but I just squeezed her hand. She had done enough by telling the truth. It should have felt like a clean win. Justice. Vindication. But as I walked out of that building, I felt something I didn't expect. Emptiness. They weren't strangers. They were my parents. They raised me, tucked me in, showed up at my school place. And still, they had looked at my success and seen it as something they deserved. Something to steal. I went home that night and sat alone in my penthouse, the city lights blinking below me. I had protected what was mine. I had fought back, but at what cost? And that's when the final twist came. A letter was slipped under my door the next morning. No return address. Inside was a short note written in hurried cursive. They weren't acting alone. Someone else wanted you out. Be careful who you trust. I stared at it, my pulse rising again. Even after everything, it wasn't over. I read that note over and over again, sitting at my kitchen counter with my coffee untouched. The words felt like a stone in my chest. They weren't acting alone. For a moment, I wanted to ignore it, to believe the nightmare was over, that my parents and Marcus were the only ones behind everything. But deep down, I knew better. The way things unfolded, the timing of the false complaints, the forged documents, how quickly they had legal responses ready. It had always felt too organized, too precise. I started quietly reviewing the last few months. Every person I had trusted, every call, every meeting. That's when one name kept circling back. Derek, my old financial advisor, the one who'd originally helped me with the paperwork for the penthouse. He was always close with my father, but I never thought much of it, until I realized he was also the one who had access to every legal and financial document connected to me. And he'd gone silent the moment the allegations started. I gave the info to my attorney, who ran a quiet background check. And there it was. Derek had recently received a large transfer into an offshore account linked to one of Marcus's shell businesses. He hadn't just been negligent. He'd been bought. He had helped them prepare the forged documentation and probably advised them on how to make the complaint against me sound credible. He betrayed me without a second thought. But we didn't go public. My attorney advised me to file a private civil suit and freeze his accounts through court order. We caught it just in time. The moment the freeze hit, Derek tried to leave the country. He was stopped at the airport and forced to cooperate in the investigation. Turns out, he handed over records that helped seal the criminal case against Marcus and cleared my name beyond doubt. The legal storm lasted months, but eventually it quieted. Marcus accepted a deal in exchange for full disclosure. My parents, they were named in the fraud case, but my lawyer and I agreed not to press full charges. The court granted me a permanent protective order instead. The final blow came when the judge ruled they had no legal right to pursue any of my property, past, present, or future. Claire moved to another city a few weeks later. We spoke often, but there was a quiet sadness in her voice whenever we talked. She apologized more times than I can count. I told her the truth, it wasn't her fault. She was the only one who tried to make it right when no one else would. That mattered. As for me, I stayed in the penthouse. I renovated the place a little, less of the cool, sharp luxury it once had. More warmth, more peace. I built something new in that space. Something that didn't remind me of betrayal, but reminded me of strength. Looking back, the lesson was simple but painful. Sometimes the biggest threat to your peace isn't from the outside. It's from the people who think they're entitled to your life simply because they share your blood. But success doesn't belong to anyone but the person who earned it. And no matter how hard people try to rewrite your story, the truth will always hold its ground. So when people ask me now why I live alone in that big penthouse, I smile and say, because I fought for it, and I won.